Robin, it's so great to have you here.
It's great to be here, really.
I loved watching you on TV growing up. We are the same age.
27.
27. And we're staying at 27.
Yeah, I was 27 last year. And
Me
next
too.
year I will be 27 again.
27 it is. Let's stay there.
My children really think I'm 27.
Do they really?
Honestly. They really
Mine know the truth.
Well, I hope they're not watching.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I'm going to have to tell them sooner or later. I actually had a teacher, one of my little boys went in and the teacher said to me, your child thinks, you're whatever. And I had to tell him, you're not, because I know you're way older than I am. You're not younger than me.
Oh, that's funny.
It was not fair.
I'm going to try that at home. Okay, your book, Grace Will Lead Me Home. I got to read it. I stayed up until 11:30 at night. And as a mom, that's hard to do.
That is hard to do.
I stayed up until 11:30 at night. You had me in tears at the very end. And for the first time, I felt like I got it, what domestic abuse was all about. I have a lot of friends who've experienced this. Grace Will Lead Me Home is on many different levels, starting with a person named Grace in your life. Tell me about your grandmother.
My grandmother, her name was Grace. And I do believe that you are who you are because of the family that you're born into. I sort of look like my mother and my mother looks like my grandmother. So only, physically, these genetics. But then I think there's this imprint in terms of behavior too. And I'd gone through a difficult time and I sort of removed myself from the business because I really wanted to try and discover how I ended up in the situation that I did. And my grandmother was such an amazing woman. I was talking about gift wrapping a little bit. You're smiling, but I can wrap a mean
I don't believe
gift.
it.
Unbelievable.
No, I believe it. I'm a terrible gift wrapper, though.
But my grandmother taught me how to gift wrap.
Wow.
And so I had to do a lot of research for this book, and I realized that she'd gotten a job at B. Altman's, which is a major department store in New York, gift wrapping. Wow. And she'd come from Kentucky, my family's from Kentucky, and moved from Kentucky with her two small girls. One was my mom. She had been in a relationship with her husband, my grandfather.
An abusive
relationship. And ended up moving to New York. I think of the courage that it must have taken her to leave
at that
time in history, alone, and move to live with her sister and their family in Harlem. And she ended up getting this job gift wrapping at B. Altman. So I'm like, so she was a professional, and meeting the man I know as my grandfather. She remarried.
I'm thinking of that because she passed that down to you. But there was something else that was passed down through your family, and that was this history of domestic abuse. It continued on with your parents.
Yeah. My grandmother moved to New York, like I said, and my mother's older sister wasn't as happy about her remarriage. You've read it, as she was, and she longed for her father. My mother ended up longing for her father and went back to Kentucky, took this trip back to meet him. And he still wasn't at a place to have time to meet her or have her in her life. And she ended up meeting my father, who I suppose was like her biological father. And I wrote this book myself. And I always say, I don't know how Miramax had the courage to let me write it, but I realized that if there had been a ghostwriter, I know that they wouldn't have gotten the information, because it really required my sort of opening up the treasure chest of one's family, and I had to assure them that I would be responsible with the secrets, because there were so many things my mother didn't want to revisit.
And I was amazed by the details. You really went back and you really went into the heart of your family. The abuse continued with your mom. She married an abusive man and had to leave as well. And so you dedicate this book to fatherless daughters. And I can't forget that story where you're the little girl with your face pressed up against the window. You had a dress on and you didn't want to sit down because you didn't want to wrinkle your dress. Take me to that day.
Well, I think after that point, too, I can almost talk to you with my eyes wide open and still remember it. So it's amazing how, now that we're 27, you still remember these things. But
I know, it's getting harder now that we're 27.
Yeah, exactly, it is. But I remember I can almost feel the coldness of the window against my cheek still, and just wanting him to come and wanting him to be there and trusting his words that he was going to be there, and wondering what gift he was going to bring me and my little sister, and wanting to be perfect and wanting him to think I was like, this perfect, pretty little girl. I think after that moment when he didn't show up and my mother sort of carried us off to bed, I gave up on him a little bit. Or you shut a door, maybe emotionally, you know? I think I did that. And our household growing up without my father was very happy, was very, you know, oh, my mother, she tried. I mean, you know, we'd have pancakes with faces made out of fruit, little notes with blessings underneath. I mean, she really tried, but I realize now as an adult that there is that void and that vacant spot.
Well, you described it as a crack in the foundation, and you actually got to go back to see your father, which was, that turned out to be a crazy situation because didn't he begin turning the abuse on you? Take me to that day.
Well, I wanted to know him, you know, so I think it broke my mother's heart in many respects that when I asked to go and spend the summer with him, and my sister was just along for the ride, you know, okay, Stephanie, my little sister. And then when I got there, he had no time for us, didn't quite know what to do with us, and
went out, played basketball.
yeah, and we weren't misbehaving, but I think I was pushing it a little bit. You know, I was sort of not confronting him, but the time we wanted to spend the night somewhere else, and he said, "No, you have to listen to me," and things got a little tough, and he was going to give me a spanking. At the time, I'd never had my father.
But
I didn't know what a
wasn't like a
But this
spanking.
wasn't like a spanking.
This was like a...
I was in danger.
Yes.
Yeah. And
pants down,
yeah,
the whole
I was
thing.
in danger.
Yes.
And I don't think I realized the danger that I was in. And my grandfather ended up coming and kind of saving the day. And it was when I came home that my mother explained, as much as we could possibly understand, the danger that I was in.
And it was amazing in reading that story because you were that little girl who was standing up to him. I mean, this little tiny thing standing up. And as you continued on, I mean, here you've excelled academically. You had this great budding acting career. Not that your mom wanted that. She wanted you to be a doctor.
She had a plan.
She had a plan.
She had, I mean, that's even to this day, she thinks that's where everything, if you had just been a doctor.
You know, I heard that too from
Did
my
you?
father. When you grow up, I want you to be a doctor. Not even close.
Yeah.
So anyway,
we can't blame them though as parents, right? I mean, I tell my 13-year-old, listen to me, you know.
Be a doctor.
Yeah. I'm not saying that, but something like that. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So here but you had so much going for you. And then what happened with Mike Tyson? Here's this accomplished woman.
Well, you know, what's amazing that I think, well, certainly he was accomplished too, so differently than I was. And I talk about his not having a father in his life. I really do believe that God knew what he was doing. You know, there was the mother, the father, a little. It was interesting for me because Michael filled the void of that longing that I had had. I talk about my father not showing up, and then not only did he show up, but he was early. You know, it was sort of like I had felt. I mean, I had dated people before, but I never really felt good enough. You know. I mean, you talk about a lack of self-esteem. I was that person. If I was just tall enough, thin enough, pretty enough, and it seemed like with him, whatever I was okay. You know, if I had Clearasil all over my face for the pimple, you know, me in sweats, you know, was okay. So it was the first time that I felt accepted and loved by a man. Now, what I believe now, looking back, is that, you know, I write in the book, if that first person, the first man, if I wasn't good enough for that first man in my life to stick around, what's wrong with me? Because I do believe that first relationship teaches you what good love is. And I just had no model for that.
Yeah. So here you are, and I began to really understand because you said at one point, you know, here's this tough guy with his head in your lap crying, saying, "Robin, protect me."
Yeah.
And just melting. But then he turns around when you're still dating and with that giant fist hits you and you go sailing across the room. Tell me about that day. And a lot of people might ask, why didn't you just cut ties then?
Well, we were sort of talking about that even before with different personalities. I felt so bonded at a certain point. And I felt like we had shared so many things, and I felt like there were so many things that I wanted to do for him. I wanted to love the pain away. I was going to make everything and anything in his life that had ever been bad better. It was my purpose, and now God had given me my purpose. I was in way over my head. I think for me, what was amazing, even about that first time that I was hit, looking back, I was speaking about this with someone, that Michael later did an interview, and I know I remember and recall it, but he recalled it so well. And somebody had asked him, what was the best punch, your best punch that you'd ever thrown? And the best punch was against me. And he said, you should have seen my wife. She went from one wall to the other. And I say if I felt any physical pain that I felt then, which is sort of covered in many respects by your adrenaline or the situation, the pain was worse, I think, to hear those words. And was it a red flag? Of course, it was more than a red flag, but like you said, to have somebody crying and
you think you can help them.
And I thought I could make it better. Yeah, I really did.
It was just one time.
Yeah.
And you say something interesting because the adrenaline's flowing. As you continued along in this relationship, the adrenaline didn't stop flowing.
No.
It was this constant state of chaos. And I found it so interesting. You said it's almost as if you stepped out of your body. You were looking in at somebody else. Describe what that's about.
Somebody that I couldn't help. I think when we make certain choices that maybe in our heart or our soul we know they're not the right choices, I sort of felt like a little me was getting chipped away at, or a little me was getting turned off, you know, emotionally. And I think for me to be able to handle so many things, I did have to kind of shut down a little bit. And I got so numb at a certain point that it was almost like it wasn't me. I was separate from that person. I didn't recognize that person. I couldn't help that person. There was nothing I could do. You were just sort of automatic, just going through the days.
As the abuse was continuing and getting worse and worse and worse. But it was interesting, the turn came when you saw the pain in your sister's eyes, Stephanie, as you're all barricaded in a laundry room.
Yeah, a place that we'd gone to quite some time. And for me, when we see people in the public eye, or you see a house and it was such a beautiful home, and I spent so much of my time in the laundry room. I know that sounds, I'm not doing laundry. Yeah,
you were hiding in the laundry room.
It just became a little haven, and the things you get used to. It's hard to believe what one can get used to. I mean, therefore the grace of God go I. I know that with any single person in any situation, because that's where we went. And so it was a big enough laundry room where a bunch of people could fit in, and to look around us. So even if you talk about the adrenaline, a bunch of us were on this wheel.
But that day, something changed.
Well,
you looked at Stephanie's eyes.
I didn't have, at that point, any love for myself. I felt so undeserving. I felt that I'd caused such a mess, that any mess going on in my life I deserved. And I didn't know how to protect myself. I just didn't know. But when I looked at my sister, who was always, I'm a person that talks a lot, I talk with my hands. My sister, who was this calm soul, who hadn't asked for any of this, when I looked at her and she was quietly shedding these tears, and she looked up at me with these brown eyes and she said, how long are you going to put us through this? How long are we going to have to take this? Well, first of all, I can't tell you how bad I felt. I mean, it was the beginning of such guilt, but at least I was feeling something at that point. And I left. I mean, Michael was banging on the door to come out, and I could have just as easily have continued on, the making up and continuing, and I left the house and never went back.
Never went back.
Yeah.
And through it all, the most amazing part of this story is you found a grace that doesn't fail. You found a father that will never leave you. And you said you almost are grateful for everything you went through. It was that person who took you to your knees, who led you to your true father. Tell me about meeting God.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, for anybody that doesn't have to go through adversity to meet our Father, more power to him. I would love that. I mean, but you know, I grew up going to church. I grew up, you know, getting on my knees and praying. I grew up really with a laundry list of things I wanted, if that makes sense, as a little girl, you know? But there was no real relationship there. And Michael, for me, that experience was really, brought me to such darkness. It made me question everything that I knew, that I saw, that I thought of myself, what I believed in. And it was there where when I really felt like I couldn't go on anymore. I mean, a sadness that is so deep that I just began having conversations. Somebody spoke to me. Something spoke to me, spoke to my heart and my soul. And just, I realized I wasn't alone. And I realized that I was loved, and I felt like there was a purpose for my life, and I felt deserving, and really put me on the track for being the woman that I am. And I wouldn't have been, the reason I'm grateful is, I mean, I sit here with you, not 27. Okay, I'll tell the truth.
We're actually 28.
Yeah, there you go. But I don't think that I would have had, I wouldn't be the person that I am. I mean, so close from perfect, but on the road, really understanding a sense of compassion and forgiveness, that there's a plan for my life. I mean, even, I didn't write this book. I mean, there's no way. I mean,
it was like the Lord helped you. Right, yes,
completely.
yes, I understand.
And one of the things that I pray for, my mother and I always talk about it, that people are touched by it, because you're not alone. I'm not alone. There are so many women, I speak to them all the time. They've either read it or they're going to read it. I was at a book signing the other day, and a woman said, I was talking, and she said, I wanted you to stop talking because I thought everybody would know you were talking about me. I mean, we're more bonded. We're more the same than we are not, whether in the public eye or not. Our stories are sometimes so similar, I think.
It's amazing to me whenever we do interviews like this, God puts somebody in the audience, in the viewing audience, who needs you, who has the same story. What would you tell that woman who's still in an abusive relationship, who just, you know, is looking at herself from the outside as you were? What would you tell her today?
Well, I'll tell her what my mother said to me. I mean, my mother sat down one night on the edge of my bed like I was a little girl. In many respects, I still was, 22. And she said, you could have a life. She said, God intends for you to have a life filled with love and success and all the things that good things that he wants you to have, but it won't be with this man. She said, it might be difficult, but you will have a wonderful life. And at that moment, I couldn't imagine life without this man. I mean, he had become, in many respects, my lifeline. I had gotten so absorbed in a problem and then fixing it. But God intends for us to live with peace and with joy, a kind of quiet joy for me. That's how I live best. Those are my happy days. So I think you can make hard decisions, and you can make that hard decision and you're not alone.
And that decision might be just leave, which is what you did, which is what your mom did, and your grandmother, Grace. You left. Didn't take anything with you. You left.
But the difference with me, and the reason I even came to this book, I was talking with Oprah. She'd called me up, and she had been through some situations with me. And I was just with my two boys, and she goes, you know what, you have a great life, and it's time that everybody knows. Come on the show. I was like, I didn't have a chance to say no. And I realized that I think so many times we don't talk about things because we're embarrassed, because we're ashamed, because we feel guilty. I know that was a lot of the things for my family. We kind of wanted it to be perfect from the outside in.
We all put on that good face.
You do. Yeah. And I said, why don't we start talking about things? Why don't we talk and write about it, talk as we're doing? Because then people do realize they're not alone. And I really want for my family and my life to sort of to break a cycle, and I think that is by trying to make things healthy from the inside out.
You say the hardest part was this part that you had to write. And this is again, you know what I'm going to read, don't you? The grace of God in your life. And this was a dedication to, you call him Michael, Mike Tyson. May the grace of God abound in you, warming you with friendship, filling you with peace, and may your heart rest assured you are truly loved. Tell me about forgiving him.
I think growing up is hard for everybody. Everybody. It's just, you don't quite know how to do it, you know? And then when you grow up in the public eye with the camera watching you, it's harder. And I just felt like he too was also a child with issues and so much success and so many people wanting pieces of him that knew he had certain issues. And I felt like he hadn't perhaps had the best opportunity to be healthy and whole. And I believe we all make mistakes and we can start again. I mean, every day you get up and you can start again. I mean, I know I think, you know, I would say I'm a recovering perfectionist. At night I go, oh my God, please God. You know, I go through the list of I could have done this better, I could have done that better. But I believe that every day you can start over. And I wanted him to know that, first of all, God loves him. He loves us all. It's a gift that's hard to accept, I think. It's been hard for me to accept because in many respects, I'll tell you, Carolyn, it was easier for me to forgive Michael than it was for me to forgive myself, you know? And it's something that I'm still working on, even with this book, because I really believe that gift is very, very hard. And I know I kind of think of it even with my children. You have children.
I do. I have two girls. You have two
I have two boys.
Which I want to hear about.
Okay. But they can make you sort of, you know, oh my God, I mean, stop it! You know, you think, you know, my house is very loud. You know?
So is ours.
So, and you think of all during the course of the day, all the things that they do, or my big one more than my little one, but you love them. You love them. That unconditional love, that sense of, oh my God, when they're sleeping at night, it's like, you know, I just can't believe it.
Doesn't it help you to forgive others by having them and by, I mean, it's just a little touch of what the Father must feel about us.
That's just, then you're saying it better than me, because that's the only thing that actually made me think, okay, if I feel I'm God's child, so then he feels this way about me. I get it. That's the thing that sort of put me on the path to getting it, you know?
And Billy and Buddy will grow up to be wonderful men.
Oh, I
can't
pray.
wait.
I
and
really
the cycle
pray.
of abuse ends with
Right
them.
now, yes.
We declare that.
Yes.
We declare that.
Yes.
Robin, you have just been wonderful.
Thank you.
You know? And I want to cry.
No, we're not crying. Stop it.
I will stop it. This is called Grace Will Lead Me Home by Robin Givens. Look for it in bookstores.